I eat a brownie and then try to talk. So I'm going to do it.
We used to call that bread and water, so. I love it. I wonder what you would think the Black Catherine tree died.
They don't even know where.
Coffee about to get jacked up before this. Coffee and chocolate should be two separate food groups.
All right, we all ready? So, good to see everybody again. I was out of country last week, which was kind of fun.
Welcome home.
Thank you. So, T.
They let you back in.
What's that?
They let you back in.
They let me back in, yeah. So I talked to Andrew, seemed like the process last week went fine, learned a little bit about asking questions and the mom test. Were there any, before I get going, for this and the final, for this week, we have a couple week gap, and then the next 2 weeks, I'll introduce something small in the beginning, just to reinforce the concept, and then we'll call on you. So you should all be ready, willing, and able to present your value proposition canvases. And then the last week we'll do the final presentations. But did anybody have any questions? Not necessarily about last week, but we can do that too. Or just about the process so far, what's expected, how did your interviews go? Strange and interesting experiences.
Oh, okay.
Anybody have anything they want to ask before we jump in? Hearing none, we'll continue forward. Okay, so first week, we tried to let you get some idea of what you're in for. When you came back, that's good. Last week, Andrew talked about how to ask questions, which is really important. Now I want to spend about 40 minutes reinforcing the concept behind the value proposition canvas to make sure that we're all aligned. I find it helpful to have you try to do it first before explaining it, because you then have it gives you a little bit of experience in the interview process to try to get your head around this thing. For housekeeping perspective, we've already lost one team, not committed, so they were removed. If you're not committed, you will be removed. So there you go. Yeah, so let's just kind of go forward from here. So hopefully this won't take too long. I do keep talking about the business model canvas, which will wind up at the end. But when you look out, when you're trying to learn a little bit about this lean startup stuff, you'll see the business model canvas a little more frequently. And again, if you remember a couple weeks ago, what I'd said was, this is really where you want to get to, but in this environment, in this university, and at the stage of development of a lot of these ideas, this actually is even a little too mature. We need to step back and really just focus on the value proposition. So I'll be a little repetitive for a minute, but remembering that the value proposition is the thing that creates value for the customer, and that value can be qualitative or quantitative, meaning the value can be goodwill towards man, or the value can be a 20% decrease in costs, or a 10% increase in efficiency. So when you do social ventures, sometimes the value proposition is really a social or societal benefit, which you can try to quantify, but it's sometimes a little easier to talk about just in terms of the qualitative nature of it. So the value proposition, there's a few other ways you can describe this, but think of that again in the context of the customer base. It can be something new, it can be increased performance, it can be customized, you can reduce risk, reduce costs, increase accessibility, all sorts of stuff. The trick is that the customer base has to respond to that. So if you remember, the last thing I talked to you about was in this value proposition canvas, this is all about your customer and this is all about you. And the things that you need to do is really focus on the customer side first. So what I'm going to do is go through all 6 sections, 3 on the right, 3 on the left, to try to give you a little bit of a hint as to how to approach this next week. So like all good lectures, I have stolen things from other people, but at least I give them credit. So I didn't draw these beautiful pictures, but I took them from someplace else. You should have read the book, so these should look familiar to you. So let's go in order. And I'm going in the order of the way that you should approach answering the questions. So the very first thing you want to know about your customer, without caring about what you have, is what do they need done? We call those customer jobs. It is whatever the work that your customer is trying to get done. So for the quick TLS, what work do you think your customer wants to get done?
They want to, well, it depends on exactly who the customer is. But
Give us who the
but
customer is and what.
in the case of, let's just say, an app developer,
Okay.
they just want it to go faster. They want to make sure
Okay.
their app is continuously connected. They want it to go faster. They want it to be, so if you're moving from, you're driving down the road, moving from tower to tower to tower, it stays connected. You go inside a building, you get to Wi-Fi, you're still connected. You switch APs, it's connected.
So one example is, so the work is, I'm going to paraphrase because I'm not in the world, is, consistent connectivity of the app to the network, something like that, or 99.9% uptime. You try to quantify that as best as you can. Okay, so these can be a task, a thing to do, which is what you're talking about. Like, I need this connected 99.9% of the time. They could have a problem that's unsolved. So those of you who are in research or in the faculty, that's kind of like you writing a grant. There's a problem out there that you think needs to be solved. Let's try to go solve that. Or something that they'd love to have done, but they don't even know that they can do. An unmet need. You can have and should have multiple jobs because you don't have one customer. You've got, hopefully, you better not have one customer. If you have one customer, you have no customers. And by the way, that includes the federal government is not a customer. You should have multiple jobs. And so these would be all the things that somebody wanted. So you talked about uptime, but I'm sure there's function and performance and blah, 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 blah. And so you would list exhaustively all the things that you think your customers want to do or need done. Through the interviews, you will then modify that list to the things that you know that your customers need done, because your very first question is, what problems do you have? How can, what is your major problem and how can I solve that? And they'll tell you. So if you do 10 or 15 customer interviews and you think you know your space, say STEM recruitment, then you should be asking a similar set of people a similar set of questions, and you're going to get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 different potential jobs. You literally can't have too many. Your job then is to rank them from insignificant to important. And that ranking will change every time you talk to somebody new. So when you start off, you're making guesses at what they might be. You have your first interview, you validate some drop off. You have your second interview, you validate some, you drop off. The reason why we ask you to do 25 at least interviews through the class is that thing kind of just, they move around a lot. It's only after 10 or 12 that you'll start to see some clarity around what those things are. So remember, you're not defining this. They're actually telling you what it is. And so it's good to keep all of them because occasionally you'll find something that is deemed unimportant. 10 interviews later becomes the single most important thing. So you never want to throw away data. Anyway, so there's your job. So these can be in a bunch of different ways. You can have them functional, percent uptime. They can be social, reduced or increased recycling rate or reduced waste of whatever. They can be emotional, being happier. feel better or calmer or less stressful or whatever. Again, it's best to quantify because you don't, if you say this makes me happier and say how much happier, well, I don't know. But if there is a quantitative state that you can fix, do that. Or it could be supporting, meaning the person you're talking to or the thing they need done supports somebody else's activity and makes that better. So they could be a middle person in the mix. So the IOL is actually a great example of that, where you're in the middle. Your customer wants something, the end user wants something, and you're in the middle saying it's all good, right? So you would be, depending on how you want to look at it, co-creating value, really transferring value. Yeah.
So if you have multiple types of people or job, like different fields that this might apply to, are we making individual VPCs for each of these kinds of things, or are we just combining them all?
So good question. In general, you want to define a customer base as broadly as you can. Okay. So you may talk to different people as long as they fit in that same bowl of who you're trying to serve. If you have two distinct customer bases, then you would ideally you would do two canvases. And what I would suggest in the early stages is please don't do that. Do one, sift the data and pick one to go with, but then keep collecting data thinking about the second. So a good example of that, if you were to think about the business model for Google, okay? Everybody thinks, what does Google do? And you say search. Well, no, Google actually sells advertisements. So the user base, is there sitting, clicking free searches, thinking Google's great because look at all that free stuff they gave you. But on the other side, they actually make their money off of advertising sales. And so you have, in that case, Kenny, you've got two customer bases. One are people who do search, and the other one are companies who need advertising. And the value of Google is fundamentally different for those two groups. These people in advertising are trying to get you to buy something. Search, the rest of us in the world are just trying to find whatever it is we need.
Want to go back to your jobs to get done. Found that you can really define a market segment by the importance one group puts on it versus another group. So that if two groups have different importance levels, that's really two market segments.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, jump in with questions because that makes it a lot more fun. Okay. So once you know what the jobs are, then it's the pain. It's the thing that they define is the problem, and not just what the problem is, but what the outcome of that problem is. So I have 90% uptime or connectivity, whatever the right word, instead of 99. What happens when that happens? I lose money. I lose time. People delete my app because it's unreliable. So it's not the thing, but it's not the cause, but it's the effect. Get it? You don't say, as I'm trying to get over a cold, I am sick. You say, I have a cough, right? The cough is the pain. So these are the undesirable things or the obstacles or something, and it can be at any point in the process. It can be before you engage with them, during the engagement, or after the engagement. So this is, again, not something you're trying to resolve. And I will be repetitive, which I apologize, but you will all make this mistake. You're not saying here, ooh, my idea fixes that. You're not doing that at all. Never do that. Just list what those things are, because you may not actually solve it, and you don't want to be thinking about your product yet. So through this presentation, which of course you'll have, I've tried to list some what I call trigger questions, ways that you can get at the thing that you're trying to look at. So for these pains, the questions are actually pretty simple. What is the biggest challenge in your field? That'll say, oh, wow, we just, we can never get to 99%. It's always 93. Well, they're telling you what they need. They tell you actually where they want to go and where they are now. What what attributes or what things are required that you can't solve? So I think of, I think of things like certification programs. So you need to certify, you need a certification, but certifications take time, like teacher certifications. They take a lot of time, but nobody has the time because they're working all the time and they never have the time to get the certification, but the certification is necessary. And you're in this infinite loop of having to take time away from something to get the certification. So maybe so it would say, well, I can't fix this. Boy, I wish it was online and could be self-taught. That is one of your things. A lot of people, this is one of my favorite questions, is where is the industry headed? Because most companies actually know where their weaknesses are. They'll know who's ahead of schedule, who's doing well, what they're not doing. I see to give UNH, you'll use it as a good example. So there are 2 universities in the state that most people know. I'm not including Dartmouth. There's UNH and there's USNH, or SNU, SNHU, right? SNHU is really great at online education, or I should say, they're great at delivering online education. They don't graduate anybody, but they're great at delivering online education. Hey, they have a 19% graduation rate. Ours is 85. Drop the mic.
So I have an observation, having done this, is that industries often have conventional wisdoms as to what's wrong.
Yeah.
And management often delude themselves into thinking that that's the problem when it is not the real problem.
Yes.
I mean, it's like there's a conventional wisdom, and then there's really the actual problem they have that may be different.
That's the beer problem.
Yeah.
In the office, they'll tell you the problem that their boss wants to tell you. And you say, let's go get a beer. They'll be like, actually, the real problem is something that my boss doesn't do. Right? So that's true. And getting that, asking the why is a great way to do that. So going back to the UNH SNU example is, so we don't do online education. We're getting there. We don't do a lot of online education. So we don't deliver online education the way that SNU delivers online education. We all know that online education is going to be the future of education in some form. It won't replace it. I don't care what you think. It's never going to replace the regular status of education. But it's clearly going that way. So we know that we've got to skate towards where that puck is headed already. What are they looking for? And then are there hurdles to being successful? Yeah.
When asking where an industry is going, is it not possible that you get an overly optimistic answer by some people, in a sense like it's almost delusionally optimistic?
But if you ask 25 people, you're probably not going to get that point of view. And that's why, again, like in the early stages, you're really collecting data and you should be completely skeptical. Because from my experience, has been it's an N of 10 or 15 where you start to see resolution. So and that's why I know people, especially our faculty are pressed for time, but if you don't get out of an N of 5, would you do an experiment and write a grant to the federal government and said, I did 4 experiments, I know this is absolutely true? Of course you would. You would want lots and lots of examples of what you're doing. That's going to be my answer to half of your questions is do more interviews, because it really does resolve itself. Remember I told you in week 1 that if you don't do the interviews and you come up here, I'll know. And I'll tell you how I know in a little bit, but there's some clarity that comes with this. Okay, so you've identified what your customer wants done. They've told you why it's painful. And then this sometimes feels like the gains are the opposite of the pains, but they're not. So there's a subtle difference. So the gains are what happens when the pain is relieved. So why is that different? Why are they not inverted from each other? Because oftentimes, we talked about the mythology or the conventional wisdom. You can relieve the pain of an opportunity and literally nothing happens. Nothing gets better, nothing gets worse. It can even be the thing that everybody tells you is the most important thing in the world. but it doesn't get better, or nothing gets better, nothing gets worse. So a lot of times it's just something that annoys someone, but there's literally no change in productivity whatsoever. So it winds up being a data point that's just not that relevant. So those gains can fall on this particular continuum. They can be functional, financial, or even emotional. Some companies love doing research because it makes them feel smart. Now, they don't necessarily have an output to that research, but they want to do research because, or they want to be seen as doing cutting edge research. Whenever and wherever you can, the gain because you don't know how much better something has gotten if you can't measure it. So that's the place where even these can be a little qualitative, these can be a little qualitative, but the benefit you have to be able to measure somehow. Because if any of you who've sold product know that if you can't give somebody an exact quantification of how their life improves, they just won't believe you. There won't be any data that you can give them that will make them change their mind.
How to convince them it's their idea.
Yes, also. that's three-dimensional chess. You get them to think, yes, actually, the thing I have is exactly what you said I should have for you.
Right.
That works
That's
great.
what you asked for, here
Yeah.
it is, so.
So for the gain, some of these trigger questions are note this is very direct. What data do you need? Notice that nothing on here talks about price. And if there's one thing I will pound all of you on, and I talked about it in week 1, is that the answer to the problem is never price. It's never, 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 never the price of a good or service. It's the value of the good or service. So most people will say, this isn't working. I'll cut the price and then the world will get better. And that almost never works. Unless because when you set a price, you should have some idea what your industry is looking at. So, this is a MacBook Air. So let's say this was $1,300. If I want to create a MacBook Air competitor that's kind of functionally the same and I charge $7,000 for it, maybe Apple could do it, but some people are like, you're just so way off for that. But if I said it was $1,600 versus $1,300, I would try to sell you the value of that. In fact, the whole business model of Apple is somehow convincing you that this is better than a much cheaper machine that does the exact same stuff. Guilty. Nonetheless, Jeff Slag is like, no Apple. Do you need, this is actually for us, kind of, does a patent need to be filed? Especially for existing businesses, do you take in new technology? There are lots of businesses go, whoa, that's too risky. That's too risky for me to take on something new. So why would you try to attempt to get them interested in something brand new when they're in a business that simply won't accept something brand new? I gave you the example of Qualys before. I mean, this was our problem. We were putting in a brand new technology into the pharmaceutical industry that really resists brand new technologies because of the risk profile. And then, how do we do this? This is a question that kind of gets at, am I talking to the right person? How do we bring new ideas into your company? They say, well, it's just not me, it's my friend Susan. Then that's a signal for you to say, oh crap, I picked the wrong person. I need to know Susan's email address and phone number, because that's actually who I should be talking to. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of frame it in the world I used to be in, there was commoditization on one side versus providing value on the other side. And you know what? If you're providing a commodity, then that's not a good place to be.
Right.
And so, you shoot for value. And there was a word we used to always say, don't get caught in the middle. You're either one or the other. You can't be, sort of half good and half, that's just not a place to be.
And if you're in a commodity business, then you have to be doing something to probably reduce costs, because that's about the only thing that you can do. There's no differentiating one cornstarch from another cornstarch. It's the same stuff. And most companies like that, they're not gonna take an outside idea, because they'll know their process so much better off In fact, did I do in week one, tell you the DuPont story? I don't think so. So I worked at UNC Chapel Hill years ago, and very briefly worked with a guy named Joe DeSimone, who right now is going, well, very shortly will be a billionaire. If you want to see the coolest technology you've ever seen in the last 15 years, look at Carbon. Carbon.com. Joe is the inventor of this company. He's on permanent sabbatical from UNC as the CEO of this company. But before he did Carbon, he worked on creating chemical-free methods of polymerization. So he wanted to create PVDF, number 2 plastic, right? The stuff we all recycle. And he wanted to do that without the use of harsh chemicals. And he did it in supercritical carbon dioxide, which I'm going to stay away from the nerdy stuff, but it just basically meant you could do it in a liquid phase that when you release the pressure, CO2 turned into a gas, you could recapture it, and you were left basically with the materials. And so he was working with DuPont, the producer of quite a bit of PVDF. And he created this process, and it was exactly as he said. It had incredible efficiency. It was relative, as far as plastics go, relatively fine for the environment. It certainly was not as harsh as the process that was developed before. DuPont actually helped fund some of the research. So when he went to ask them if they would take it on, the head of production of DuPont said, this is not a direct quote, but it is nearly a direct quote. If you created a process that resulted in a cloud, and that cloud was filled with PVDF, and you could direct that cloud over a rail car that was empty, already driving on the track, and make it rain PVDF into the rail car on its way to our customers, it still wouldn't be cheaper than what we do. So there is no way, even though it worked and it did everything else, they were uninterested in it because they had squeezed every last drop of efficiency out of their process. And they're in the chemical business, so they were kind of like, green chemistry, it's nice, but we don't need it, and it's going to be half a penny more expensive, and we sell trillions of pounds of this stuff, so no. Even though it had everything that they wanted, you still can't get there, and especially in those commodity industries. Okay, so pains, gains, and jobs. And again, remember, your customers get jobs, your customers pain, your customers gain. You are not involved yet. Try to ask why, how much, what does that mean? What's the result of that? Why is that so painful? Anytime you can get a data point that you can kind of try to measure, try and measure it. And McKenna, this is your thing. Don't mix customer segments. If you find you've got 2 customer bases, keep them separate. You can ask them the same questions, but keep the data separate so you can figure out if you can find the truth for one or the other. It's very rare to have one value proposition for multiple segments. Just the way this is designed, it just doesn't really work. And I'm going to repeat this for the 3rd time today and probably the 5th time since we started meeting. Be objective, base them on the discussion, not on your assumptions or your inferences of what's in. Everybody tries to calculate and make it an equation that they're trying to solve. You cannot do that. So after I'm sure Andrew said this last week, but you can be 10, 15, 20 interviews into this process and never talk about what you're interested in and never talk about what you're doing. In fact, you should be 10, 15, 20 interviews in before you're even thinking about your own stuff. The longer you can push off bringing your preconceived notions into this, the better it's going to be for you. It's fooling yourself a little bit. You have to turn off the very reason that you're in the room in the first place. I get it. Okay. So you get to embrace in this process your inner 3-year-old. And you just get to ask people why 1,000 times over. My experience has been 3 whys will actually get you the right answer. 5 whys, you're annoyed. But 1 why is not enough. Because the first one will be, you say, why? You're like, no. Tell me a little more. Why do you really believe that? And then they'll sort of like open a little bit. And then The third time, what you're telling them is, you're not telling me what I need to know. And then the politeness will drop. And they'll just, if there's something to say, they'll probably tell you. Right? So part of the art of asking questions is knowing when to back off. When we're all human beings. You get pissed off when people ask you the same thing over and over again. For some people, it'll be the first one. For some people, you can ask that why question 3, 4, 5 times and they won't get annoyed. You got to figure out how to titrate between the two. And that's all done from a position of respect. You're trying to get them. You're really there to help them. You're really there to learn. If you're not selling them anything, this is a much more innocuous conversation. You're looking for, where do I slide my idea into this conversation? I'm annoyed by you. So they're certainly going to be annoyed by you. If it's their idea, right? If you can figure out when you get some experience with this, you can figure out how to do this while you're elevating your customer. You're saying, well, you're the expert. What would you do? How would you solve this? Anytime you tell somebody they're the expert, or you know better than me, right? They're like, I must. They're going to start to share their opinions with you because you're deferring to their expertise. And in this whole process, your customer is your expert because you need them to believe in you. So they are the expert of this engagement so far. So that said, this is not universally true. So can anybody think of an example where doing this would actually be considered inappropriate or disrespectful? Or an experience you had where approaching it this way would not only just be not liked because it's uncomfortable for people, but where you would actually really upset people. Personal, professional life, anything like that.
So why did you pick the particular vendor that you're working with now? It's been pretty negative from what I've seen, because now you're using the term why and kind of
It's a little bit of a
challenging as to whether they're intelligent or not. That kind of
And
thing.
your tone of voice matters too, right? The way you ask that question. You say, why did you choose that vendor? Versus, why did you choose that vendor? Right? How you change your voice matters a lot. Somebody else has their hand raised. Matt?
Asking why too soon?
Yep.
So specifically, going through customer discovery and you have to ask potentially a personal question. You wouldn't do that up front.
Right.
You would wait to have a more comfortable place in the conversation.
Any other places?
When I started out, I had somebody say, you have somebody who understands our industry, call me back. So I think, there's a certain degree of establishing your credibility before you jump into the why.
Now, you all have a built-in excuse. You're at a university and you're in a class and you're trying to learn. That is the great get out of jail free card. Right? I'm at UNH and I'm on a project and I just want to understand a little more about you. Is that okay? Who's going to say no? Like, I don't want anyone to learn. That would be terrible. Right? Nobody's going to say that. So you do have a little bit of a get out of jail free card.
I don't know how much this is adding, but for us, there are some areas of testing and certification. It's not necessarily disrespectful and inappropriate, but it definitely, there's a negative response. We ask them, why do you test this? Because government makes us, or because so-and-so makes us, and we don't have any choice. Just we test because we do that. Forget, end the conversation. We don't like it. We don't want anything to do with it. It's
Right.
just,
And some of that is mitigated by learning a little bit about who you're talking to, and knowing a little bit about doing your research before you talk to someone.
You might not want to ask Corey right now why they put an anti-swap feature on the second.
Well, true. Why is a form of embarrassment doesn't really work. There's one other thing that comes up quite a bit in business. How many of you were born outside the United States? A couple. Vitally? Where were you born? Okay. In India, if I asked your boss's boss why 2 or 3 times, how would that be received?
Very well.
Why not?
Why do you need to know?
Yeah, it's disrespectful. You're asking the person who's in charge. You're putting them in a position of justifying their decisions. In other cultures, huge no-no. You're already done. China can be that China changes so frequently, but China can be that way. India is absolutely that way. South Korea, completely that way. If you jump a chain of command or you are asking, if you're the big boss and you're talking to the big boss, you get around this a little bit. But if you're 3 levels down on your side and you're talking to the big boss on their side, you will just get stared at until you shut up. And they won't tell you. It'll just be really long pause until someone who's at your level on the other side of the table will open up the conversation again to you, ignoring what you just said. So we, for the rest of us who were born inside the country, we suck at this. We're really bad at accepting other people's cultures or respecting other people's cultures when we have these conversations, because of our bias of just like Americans are notorious around the world. We're just trying to get stuff done. We're just trying to do this thing. We don't, there's no little small talk, but small talk for an American is like 2.5 minutes while you're in line getting your coffee. If small talk in Costa Rica is a day. In Japan, it's 6 to 8 months of small talk before you get around to, not consecutive, but of engaging and going back and forth. I did a deal once in South Korea where I was talking to them for 18 months on the phone every month to get a project done. They're like, this sounds great. We're very excited. We're really interested in what you're doing. And I said, I'm going to come see you next month. They went, okay. And I flew over to Seoul for a day, sat down at a table. We had the same exact conversation I had for the previous 18 months, and we ended with, yeah, okay, we're doing it. Because the in-person stuff, the traveling was the trust. So it meant just, you got to know where you are.
Done work in Africa, I've done work in the People's Republic, I've done work in Mexico, and all these places, relationships.
That's right.
And knowing people who know people is has to be your door opener.
Yeah.
If you go in cold, you've got a problem, but if you're going in with such and such, it's, somebody, if there's a relationship there, you have to sort of latch on to it to try to get people to work with you. So.
Same thing there? Yeah. How did that manifest itself? You were dealing with nonprofit stuff, right?
It was a Robert. There's cultural stuff. There's elements of corruption. There's never wanted to just flee, so it's yes, yes, yes. Because of the honor they didn't want to disrespect. So.
Right. Yeah. Right. Again, Japan is famous. Yes does not mean I agree. It means I heard you.
And the other problem as an American is they all assume we're arrogant. So I knew, when I was working in the People's Republic, and he said, well, you're not like other Americans I've met.
Right.
Okay.
You're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, now I have to tamp down my actual personness when I go overseas. It'd be the first time I was accused of it. So, all right, so we're on the other side. Now, thankfully, we can all take a breath. We're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about your products and services and the things that you have. So ideally, you have spent a couple of weeks figuring this out. You have some idea where you are. Now, forget about this. So we're having temporary amnesia through this process. Now that you know everything you want to know or what you think you want to know about the customer, now, honestly as you can, you go through this side. Sometimes it helps to have somebody else do it for you. That's where your mentors are there. Your mentors are not as involved in your project as you are. And so the mentors can give a BS check against this stuff. As you have biases, you can't help yourself. That's why we love you. So the products are what you have, and then what the offering is to the customer. And again, you can have 30 different things. but rank them in the order that you perceive, and amnesia on the right side. Left, stage right, left side. The order that you perceive are necessary to nice to have, require, essential to nice to have. This side's a little loose. So much like the other side, there are then the pain relievers. And that is the relief your product provides to the customer, in your opinion. And then try to quantify that. Well, we can guarantee a 50% increase in uptime. We can guarantee, I don't know, Ambrosia Fabrics, what do you do? I know that,
Sustainable upholstery fabric, sustainable performance fabric.
okay, so what is the pain, for you, what do you think the pain reliever is?
Creating performance but with natural fibers rather than synthetic fibers.
Okay, so why does anybody care about that?
The reason they care about it is they care about performance first. That's what we've
Okay.
learned through this process. But some people may or may not like the feel of the synthetic fibers, whereas the natural fibers that we're going to use are a completely different feel.
Okay. And you, I'll stop there because we'll give you a chance to tell that. Okay, so the pain relievers, it actually was a really nice example. Performance first. So you have bamboo sustainable fabric, right?
Right.
But they're not talking about bamboo, you're not talking about sustainability, because if it doesn't perform at or near what a synthetic fiber performs at, you don't have a customer.
Yeah.
Right, or you don't have the customer you want.
Right.
You might have a different customer.
Right.
But you don't have the customer you want.
Right.
That's a good example, a way of saying, we will have, the pain relief is you get the same performance, so you don't have to sacrifice on performance. Now, for the quantity, you might say you get 100% of the importance of synthetic fiber, or 95%, or 93% of the performance of a synthetic fiber, but it's biodegradable, renewable, whatever it is you want to say. So sometimes that the quantification is you're not actually saying you're better. You're saying you're like good enough for government work, but our second feature is the thing that'll bring you home. Right. So there'll be some people who say, well, I don't know that I would know what 100% performance feels like, so 93% seems good enough for me. I'll give it a shot. And then the last is the gain creators. And this is, again, this is the relief you provide, which is on one hand, and then what's the gain? Yeah.
About pain reliever. So in that example that you were talking about, the pain essentially would be emotional in the sense that you wanted biodegradable product or
Could be.
or
I mean,
or
and it can be
organic product,
both.
and then the pain reliever being
Right.
that it's
Right. It could be, you could answer this in one of two ways. You could say, and I'm just making stuff up, so this may not be actually what they're talking about, but you could want, the standard could be a light cotton sock. And so you want enhanced performance over a white cotton sock, dryness, wicking, whatever it is you're talking about. So that could be one pain relief is, keeps your feet 50% drier than a white cotton sock. Or if you're interested in the sustainability, you can say the pain relief might be same performance as synthetic fabric X, but all natural renewable resource.
I go back to your first lecture where you talked about there's the end user and there's the customer.
Mhm.
So to me, it's like when you're talking about that is what you're saying, this is what will resonate with your customers, if you're, right? I mean, that's really the point. It's getting back to, this is good because your customers will want it.
Right. Yes. But at this point, until we finish the presentation, it's what you perceive the customers will value. Right? And then the gain creator is what comes out of that. That engagement, that experience, what's the result that you think the customers will have? Satisfaction, sustainability, whatever, right? It's easy to get these two mixed up, but think of it as this is what gets solved, and this is what's the benefit of solving this. This is your product, this is what your solution, and this is the benefit to the customer for implementing the solution. You can flip-flop them a little bit, but that logic will flow. So here you have what they need done, the result of not getting it done, the benefit of getting it done. Here you have the thing you would like to do, the result of implementing your solution, and the benefit that this solution gives. So it's not complicated, but repeating that to yourself does help a little bit. So after you've done, now we're still on the left side, after you've done products, gains, and relief, once again, you're ranking them in order of importance. What do I think is the most best? Solution. Next best, next best. And then you start to combine the two. So ideally, you do all those interviews and you get all that feedback, and then you reflect on your product and you say, this is what we think we have. Then you get to put the formula together. Because then what you'll find, you're either here, which you'll never be, or you're more like here, where there's some match, some parts of the equation balance, but most of it doesn't. And then that gives you, and that's why I say try to have amnesia about each side in succession, because it's sort of the big reveal. When you put them together, if you do it right, and it's super hard, you'll actually see the disconnect between what you started thinking about and what you're being told. If you try to solve it too quickly, you'll cheat, and you'll literally short circuit the process. So you'll cheat and you'll think, this solves this thing, but you forgot to go back and start the whole process all over again, and you'll miss it. So yeah, sometimes, especially with engineers, they'll say, like, it's faster, it's better, technology solves it, but if nobody cares that it's faster or better, it doesn't really matter. Again, with the fabrics, it might be sustainable, but 50% the performance of a synthetic, then you're selling it wrong, right? Then you just say it's a sustainable stock, and you don't talk about performance, because the performance really doesn't matter. All right? Okay. So here's what I want you to do as a group in 5 minutes, is I want you to try and define what you have in terms of the pain and gain. Okay? So we're trying to get you should have done some of this ahead of time, but I want to see what you've got in terms of customer pains and gains. And then secondly, just after a little bit of discussion, knowing that, who else do you think you could serve? So maybe you've already started to think about other people that you can serve, but is there another customer base that benefits from that same thing? So I'll give you 3 to 5 minutes to do that real quick.
I was like, oh, yeah, I'd love to go.
And again, it's.
Got a couple people on the phone, so I'm gonna get the chatter now. All right, we're back. So I've got a couple of people on the phone, so that we're in class chatter, then it's just like explodes there. If you've ever been on a conference call where everybody writes and then you now you know what they're up for. Okay, who would like to offer something up? This can be 30 seconds. Okay.
So are you wanting us to say pains then gains, or just define the
I'd
product?
like you to define your product in terms of your customers' pains and gains.
Okay. So our product is a sustainable performance fabric that doesn't use harmful chemicals to achieve the same performance as synthetic fabrics.
Okay, say that again.
Sustainable performance fabrics that don't use harmful chemicals to achieve the performance that the customer is looking for.
Do you know that your customers care about synthetic chemicals?
That's what we've gotten for feedback.
Okay. What do they care more about? Performance or? Okay. So you're trying to push the chemical-free stuff more
The
than.
non-toxic chemistry, yeah. The non-toxic chemistry, yeah.
It's all chemistry.
Oh, yeah, no, I know. Yeah, no, I know. Yeah.
Okay. So is anybody telling you so they're telling you very clearly performance makes sense. Is anybody telling you that is anyone responding to the non-toxic part?
There are. I think it goes with the price point. Like there's certain, when you talk to some of the retailers that are at the lower end of the price point spectrum, people don't care. They don't bring it up. They never mention it. They never get any questions about it whatsoever, about sustainability, anything of that matter. You start getting into the $1,500 plus range for a sofa. That's when people start asking them the question of what is it treated with? Is there another option? But first and foremost, the performance comes first. That's what we've kind of learned.
So you're talking all kinds of fabrics, not just a pair of socks.
No, upholstery specifically. Yep, furniture, yeah.
Okay. I'll leave that there. Who wants to- Yeah.
Main Street Academy helps towns, community leaders, residents, and businesses who want a vibrant downtown by teaching best practices, learning from other communities.
Okay. One more time. I got you. I was waiting for the
Okay.
what do you do part, and I was holding out for what you're going to tell us what you do.
Figuring that out.
Okay.
Main Street Academy helps towns, community leaders, residents, and businesses who want a vibrant downtown or Main Street by teaching best practices and creating a learning network with other towns.
Say the same thing, but flip the phrases. Tell us what you do first,
Okay.
and then what the benefit is second.
Okay. So we teach,
Now just read it, but flip.
I'm not reading that.
Okay.
I'm trying to flip it in my
Okay.
brain. Main Street Academy teaches best practices to community leaders, businesses,
Best
residents
practices for what?
for community vibrancy or vibrant downtown.
Okay. By doing what? So
Teaching
you.
community leaders and volunteers how to do it.
Okay. So what are the reasons? So sometimes the order of operations is really helpful. So we do this. So define your product. Our product is this, and this is what you get out of it.
Vibrant downtown.
Okay. Right. Community redevelopment, economic engagement, however you want to put it. Okay. So it's not wrong the other way, but see how much clearer it becomes when you say we are this and you get this.
Thank you. That's
Right?
so much better. We know who we are.
So well, and that's actually the challenge with a lot of you is you know who you are, but you don't know who other people want to hear you as, right? So your story is not their story. So sometimes you've got to redefine the way you talk about yourself so that it resonates to other people. Have you ever been on a bad date, but you kind of like the person, but it didn't work out and you don't know why? Chances are the words are just not fitting. You could have had that interaction in a different way and might have had a different outcome, right?
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
So what I think we're not conveying is what we're finding in our interviews, something we had a hunch on, but that's being verified with every interview, in that this is not an economic development activity. This is about valuing the heart of your downtown as your heart and soul. And so
So maybe what you think you do, you don't actually do.
no, actually, we do that, but we've always hit it in economic development.
Well,
because people
that's what I
think
mean.
That's what you're supposed to do.
That's what you say you do, but that's not what you do.
Right. So should we start owning that? Like,
What do people respond to? Do people respond to embracing and loving your downtown, or do people respond to the community economic development?
loving their downtown. They don't even care about the economy.
Then why are you selling them something they don't want?
Well, that's what we're saying.
We're gonna hold there for a second. Crystal, what do you think?
Yes, that's the other thing.
So our product is a tool to help bring together prospective graduate student mentors and prospective graduates and increase to enhance recruitment and increase retention.
Okay, who's your customer? Who's your customer?
I have in my head an idea that there are 3 customers.
Okay, shoot.
So the first ones that we are engaging with are faculty.
Okay,
And the next group I'm engaging with and trying to understand what they need and what their process is like for the prospective graduate students.
okay.
And then the third group is the higher level institutional people that are.
Okay. So you have the employer, the faculty, and the prospective students. So re-say what you said, and then tell me who you're talking to. Meaning, give me this again, but then tell me who you're actually talking to.
So the product that we're interested in developing is a tool to enhance graduate student recruitment and retention.
Okay.
by pairing,
I'm actually gonna stop you.
okay.
Recruitment. Who cares about recruitment?
The faculty in the institution.
The administration
Administration.
and the board.
Well, and I mean, so, so the faculty in the university setting, the faculty rule that particular roost, right? Who values retention?
The faculty and the students.
And the institute. I mean, when you don't matriculate, we get hammered, right? So the retention piece might actually, I would actually argue that in the way you defined it now, student doesn't matter nearly as much as you think. Meaning recruitment is the student, I mean, students love being recruited, but let's face it, the students are walking in the door saying, I'm thinking about you, and then everyone's, you know, I have to compete for you against all the other universities. The retention, you know, it's not like you're giving students, I mean, you're giving grants and stuff. It's not like you're giving them money or bonuses to stick around. The retention is really more about the faculty wants to bring in a grad student, keep them to get the work done. The student's already self-motivated. If they're going to grad school, they want to graduate, they want a PhD or whatever.
In the STEM disciplines though, if it is not the right project and they don't stay, it is wasting time for them. They have to start over without their degree.
Okay. Yeah, wasted time for them as well, because they don't,
Yeah,
nobody wants to start their dissertation over.
you don't want to have to go look for a job and say, well, I had to drop that. Right?
Okay. So what I was trying to do very quickly is say, you said recruitment and retention, but as soon as you had and, you're shifting where the value sits. And so you might want to break that sentence apart and say a tool for, it's really who are you talking to? And I'm going to be a little provocative and say, in truth, you don't care about the student, right? Because you want to find good students and you want to keep them so you know they want to graduate. They're motivated to finish. For a faculty member, you just want to keep them to do the project to get them through. Because it's kind of worse for you as a faculty member to have somebody start and stop. And then, because if they leave, you don't go like, you know, I wish you're like, leave, okay, I need another grad student to do that project.
But all students are not created equal.
This is true.
You want the best students.
You do, right? But who wants the best students?
Faculty members.
Does every student think they are not the best?
It doesn't matter.
Exactly right. It doesn't matter what they think about themselves. It only matters what you think about them. That's kind of my point.
I think it goes back to the Google example, right? But Google's selling to the advertisers, you're selling to the faculty. They need the users, so it has to interact with the users, but they're not the ones paying at the end of the day.
And I may not be right. I'm doing this for a point, right? Is just think to like for the next week, say to yourself, how much do the students really matter in this to what I'm trying to do? And I think it's less than you think it is now. It doesn't mean that it doesn't. It's just as you defined it, not so much. You could define it differently. You could invert your model and have it be the students competing, you know, doing a Dutch auction with different faculty around the country to compete. Kind of like med school matching, right? Where med schools is you have all these quality students and the organization is competing for them. Here, it's a little bit the reverse.
95 on 236, and there's a big wooded area there, and there's a developer there with
All right, whoever's come on,
active plan there.
done their thing.
He wants to build apartments and housing
Mhm.
over there.
Jason.
Ooh, about high rise. Never thought of high rise.
Wow, really?
4-story
Leave it muted.
Wow.
buildings.
Unmuted it.
That's really
Imagine
interesting.
Kittery, a 4-story.
That's crazy. I mean, where I grew up in Virginia, I mean, it's been really interesting.
236, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can't even imagine having four, you know. Oh my goodness.
The thought of the aesthetics of
Of the small town vibe, right? Yeah. Mhm.
all those. No, anyway, go ahead.
No, I mean, just the place that I grew up in Virginia is very much like that, where you see high rises go up all the time, and it was just a very bustling, kind of booming area. And then I moved up here, and I liked it because it was a lot more of that kind of small town kind of a feel, but still having some, you know, some amenities around you without having to drive hours.
We can hear you. I got him. All right.
Problem has been resolved.
Yes.
Well
So there needs to be a business for faster use.
Yeah.
So that was Jason.
Could have been worse, they could have been talking about like ex-girlfriends.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Or how bad they hate being in stuff. That was really awkward.
Oh my God, that
I
class.
believe they're getting talking right now.
Okay, one more. Just anybody want to give a shot, Matt?
Electricity generation through nuclear fusion with reduced safety risks, fuel costs, and pollution.
But you're cheating because you do this a lot. Okay, good.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention to everybody as we go forward, so we're gonna take the 2-week break and come back, and when we come back, only the entrepreneurial leads and the technical leads will talk. So we'll leave the mentors off, because the mentors have a lot to say, but we want to get the entrepreneurial leads and the technical leads to be jumping in. I think I said earlier, especially the technical leads, you need to be doing the interviews too. You need to be made to be uncomfortable. That is the whole point. So I'm gonna challenge you on that. Okay, great. So just kind of wrapping up the value proposition side. They're good things. All we're trying to do is and I've already heard a couple people say they've gone out, they've done the interviews, they've come back, it's already changed a little bit of what you're saying. I mean, and we talked, remember the first week we talked about the pivot? That's kind of, early stage. You're saying, I'm telling them something that they don't care about. They actually value something fundamentally different.
Seems to be all, I think at the level of degree are all wrapped into one, I think we need more interviews too.
Yeah, but don't hold on to something that you want to be true.
Oh, I love what they're saying. I always wanted
Right.
that.
Well, but it also, it comes back to being able to articulate to your boss or whoever's saying this is about economic development, say, hey, we talked to 30 people and they don't care, but they do care about a vibrant downtown. The economic development stuff, they kind of don't care about. I mean, they hope it happens, but a vibrant downtown leads to that. But a vibrant downtown that is 40% less economically active actually doesn't matter to them, because they just want to see the downtown live and in action. Right? So we'll give you, we can also give you justification to change your projects for people. That's all. That's also good. So in this whole process, you're measuring, you're learning, and you're moving around. Okay. So one of the things two things that you'll hear me say a lot in this class are who cares and so what. So you're going to make a statement. I'm going to say who cares, right? I already did that. Who cares do anybody care about the sustainability of creating these fabrics? No, right? Who cares? Me, so far. Maybe they will. And then the other thing is, so what? All right, so you create a high-performance biodegradable fabric. So what? For sustainable fabric. So what? Great. Tell me, so what? Why does it matter? Why does the world care? Why do they need what you have to offer?
They need what we have to offer, because the other products that are on the market aren't going to get the same performance that they're getting. So you either right now have the divide of getting a bunch of chemicals that you don't necessarily want in a fabric, or you get the latter, which is something that's just raw, undyed, unfinished, unbleached, and it's not going to perform just the way you'd like it to.
Okay, so what? So undyed or untreated fabric, buy a new couch.
It's expensive to buy a new couch.
How expensive? How much does your stuff cost? Is it cheaper than the $99 couch I can buy at Walmart and throw away every year? So what? So I'm not saying it doesn't matter. So you keep asking yourself, so what? Don't assume that other people value the things you assume. And that's, it's just confronting eventually you get to the point where, there is a little bit of a leap of faith. You say, well, there's enough people that think that this is useful, or they say, it can work in the opposite too, is you may not think it's a big deal, but a bunch of people want to pay for it. Oh, great. So what? So what? There's a bunch of people who want to pay for my stuff. That's good enough for me. Make some money when you can make some money. You don't always have to save the world. Sometimes you can do both. And we talked about this a bunch. the single value proposition for customer segment. So when you create those questions, and I know Beth and Matt helped you with the questions after week 1, before week 2, you should be revising your questions every week. And what I would challenge you with is when you get those new questions, ask yourself those 2 things. Read the question, say, who cares, so what? And if you ask a question and you say, who cares, and you say, I don't know, it's the wrong question. You say, so what? The answer is, actually, it doesn't really matter to anything. It's the wrong question. It doesn't mean it's the wrong type of question or the wrong angle of your question. It doesn't mean that the inquiry is wrong. It just means that if you can't convince yourself that the question matters, nobody else is going to care. So adjusting a little bit. But again, the more you know about that customer segment, the more you're going to be able to dial your questions in to address their needs. So if we go back again to community engagement, maybe the questions start to morph around, how do you feel about your town? What did it used to be? What do you perceive is different today than it was? Because everybody always has a rosy view of their past, right? It may not have always been rosy. I remember when my kids could ride their bikes to school every day and nothing would happen to them, but the rivers were polluted, but they could ride their bikes, right? So people tend to have a little bit too rosy of a view of the past. But it may be that there were more mom and pop shops. There was a community center that never came back. There was some May Day, whatever it is, some convening event that they stopped doing. And I live in Rye. For some dumb reason, the town stopped doing the spaghetti dinner. And the school always, for 50 years, the school did a spaghetti dinner, and the 6th grade, you remember it, right?
This is a happy part of the year.
Yeah. The 5th graders would serve, the 4th graders would dish out, and something like that. So every grade had a role. Was it a good meal? No, it was not. but was there a tremendous sense of community? There was. And they got rid of it because somebody decided it was boring and they'd done it too long and they didn't replace it.
So it sounds like Rye needs Main Street Academy.
Rye doesn't have a Main Street, but yes.
Yeah, everywhere has a Main Street.
Well, yes, then we need Main Street Academy. But there's an example of, something that people actually miss and now people are talking about it, but it's been so long, it's sort of like, how do we get it back? There's that sense of community that you miss. Okay. We talked about quantities. Okay, and here's the last thing that I'm good at, and this will be the homework assignment for next week. I call this the Mad Lib. So if any of you were kids and you did Mad Libs, this is sort of the framing of a good start to the framing of the value proposition. So, we believe that the thing that we do will result in a specific outcome, and we will know we have succeeded when this particular thing has done. So what I'm going to ask you to do right now for another 5 minutes is I'm actually going to ask you to fill this out, but then when we come back in 2 weeks, well, the 3rd week, we have a 2-week break. When we come back on the 3rd week, I want you to have revised this and have this be a real powerful statement. So for right now, let's just take 5 minutes and let's write your sample hypothesis in this format. All right? So you got 5 minutes. Pull it back together. It doesn't have to be perfect. You'll get another shot at this next week. I would like to call on the disembodied voices of Stephen and Jared on the phone to give us their shot. Y'all are on the same team, right? Stephen and Jared?
Yes, we are.
All right, so why don't you give this a shot?
All right, so we believe that innovation and entrepreneurship programming and processes targeted at the private, public, and nonprofit sectors will result in increased innovation at the individual. This sounds like a lot now that I'm reading it.
Yeah, well, let's start over. I missed the beginning because it was a little loud.
Okay, we believe innovation and entrepreneurial programming and processes targeted at private, public, and nonprofit sectors will result in. What was that?
I said, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, so we got to hone it in a little bit.
Will result in.
increased innovation for individuals, organizations, and communities. And we know we've succeeded when we see increased, that's sort of where I'm at, business, but I'm thinking business startups, projects implemented in communities. So some of those key metrics.
Okay.
I'd have to figure that part out.
Yeah, so I think, so a lot of words. What I would do is try to split that apart into one or two things and try to say, just deal with one thing, because innovation, what did you say? It was like nonprofit, business, since there were like 3 people you were speaking to, just try to talk to one of them to start. And then, so one of the other things we talk about in the class are what I like to call weasel words, which are things that you say that sound great but don't mean anything. So what does increased innovation mean? I read a book. I know that measurable signal is the thing where you say, the 20% increase in startup formation. But what is that outcome? Increased innovation is something that I don't know that you can say I don't know how you'd measure it as an outcome. Now you could say will result in additional startup companies and will succeed when there's a 20% increase in new company formation in our county, right? You start to get very specific, but make sure you're not, and the reason why we put it in this Mad Lib form is to make sure that we don't use the flowery words that we use when we're not sure what we're gonna say. Okay, so not a bad first shot, but you'll have 2 weeks to get that back over. I think your mentor is talking.
So my question would be, who is their audience? I mean, who is their customer?
Right.
In other words, if they want support from the community, what does the community want? Do they want economic growth? Do they want people working and generating a thriving community because they are doing X? In other words, if there are more innovators, what happens within that town? I mean, you look at Portsmouth, Portsmouth growth or the restaurants thrive upon the music hall and the arts. So people go to the music hall and they all go out to eat. So what's the value to who's their customer and what's the value to it?
So Jared, who's your customer?
Yeah, so I think what we found as we got started is we probably have too many customers, but we were thinking of in those 3 sectors. We want to see local government innovation.
What are the 3?
Was the private, nonprofit, and then in local government.
Okay. Private industry, nonprofits, and local government. Those are your. That's way too broad. That's you're trying to solve everything all at once. And this doesn't mean that eventually you can't solve everything, but when you start, pick one.
Yeah.
Pick one and find, and this is true for everybody, pick one thing that you think you can find a nugget of truth before you try to expand it out to multiple segments. So what I would say is Jared, you have like a nested if-then statement. So try it for private enterprise and then say, all right, well, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to ask the government and see if it's true. And if it's true for both of those things, then ask nonprofits. And if it's true for all 3 of those things, which it won't be, but if it were, then you could make that full statement. But I think what you'll find is those 3 different segments behave so fundamentally differently that they will each want a different result and they will each have a different measurement of success. So you don't have to eat the elephant all at once. Just pick one of those things and go with the one that's most interesting to you, or if you want to cheat, the one that you've done the most interviews with already. That's fine too. Don't care.
Perfect.
All right. So Sapiens, why don't you go?
So we believe that by aligning the interests of students, institutions of higher education, and sources of financing, that will result in better outcomes for both students, institutions, and their communities. We will know we have succeeded when there has been a meaningful reduction in student debt burden in communities across the country.
Nothing quantifiable in that entire statement, right? There's nothing that I literally don't know what you're doing in that. You want a better outcome? Great. I would love a better outcome too. Better outcome for dinner, better outcome in class, What is the outcome that you want? What is it? So what's the outcome you want?
Reduce that load on students for starters.
Okay, that is way better than better outcome. Will result in a reduced debt load for students. Much more compelling all that. Okay? Remember, you don't assume that we know what you're doing,
Okay.
right?
I think I put, we will know we have succeeded. What I put for that would have been better as will result.
Yeah, and again, some of this is moving the words around and putting them in the right places. But okay, but you can say, we believe that, I forget the first part, doesn't matter, will result in a reduced debt load, student debt load. We will succeed it as what result? What is the reduction? What's meaningful? What's measurable? What do you think it is?
I think realistically, you could reduce it by half if you implemented it properly.
Okay. Now, would that be the only, measurement of success? Meaning, like, if I can't get to 50%, I don't think I've done a good job?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
But what on the scope too, because.
But you get to define the scope.
Well, and that's the thing, scopes kind of change through some of the.
Yeah, no, that happens. So 5%? Does that make you feel good?
Well, so the scope would be on a micro sense, whereas initially it was universities broadly. Now the implementation looks like it would be more effective if it were implemented university by university.
Okay.
And therefore you have to measure success in each of those individual.
But who's your customer? So why do the universities care what the student debt load is?
Because the investor may no longer be the customer, and the university may have just became the investor and gatekeeper.
How is that?
Because sources of capital in private investment sources, in some of my more recent interviews, it's been revealed that that may not be the most effective way to get this up from a scalable perspective, because my understanding is that the number is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million for this to be viable.
Okay.
And that's from a reputable source. That's Peter Paul's estimate.
Somebody's got.
And his perspective being that that's the number that would have to be minimum viable. It may be more effective to seek to motivate endowments to invest this capital and use that as positive PR of, oh, we're not just investing our endowment money in the stock market, we're actually investing in our students. And when our students succeed, we earn money on that initial investment. And when our students don't succeed, we're tying those interests together.
Complex, back it up, right? You're already want to talk about how you're going to solve it. I don't care. I want to know who's going to benefit and what a reduction would be. So we're going to reduce student debt by 5%, 10%, 15%?
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, it would have to be measured on those individual university basis. Because
So explain that to me. So I literally don't understand what you're doing. So the students have the debt. And let me tell you, as a university, once you have the debt, we've gotten paid.
Correct.
So tell me why we care after you obtain the debt. By the way, I have nothing to do with finance in this university. I'm being provocative for the sake of being provocative. Why do I care? You already took the debt, I got my money.
It's not existing debt, it's new debt.
Okay?
And it would be using funds, allocating funds in a different way from the endowment, whereas typically endowments invest solely in.
So the endowments are investing in the students.
Correct. And with the understanding that if the students secure good jobs, they share a portion of their income for like 8 years or whatever it is after they graduate. Terms vary based on the risk.
So you're shifting the source of financial aid from the federal government, for lack of a better, I mean, eventually it gets to a bank, but from the federal government to the university.
Correct. And supplementing federal student loans and hopefully eliminating as many of the private student loans as possible.
Right. So why do we want to do that?
Why do we want to do that?
Why does the university want to be a bank?
The university, well, they don't want to be a bank, but they want to tie their interests to the outcomes that students drive because for two reasons. One, if it's done right, the university could see better returns than they're seeing in their existing investments. And that's based on Purdue that's already doing this. Two, there's a lot of public outcry about endowments mismanaging or ineffectively allocating their capital. This can shut up a lot of people on that front and provide a meaningful PR solution of, look, we're investing our capital in a way that
So is it
is
just
more
window
palatable.
dressing, or is it meaningful?
It's meaningful, but it has the benefit in an ancillary purpose of being window dressing, which I think helps to motivate people that make those sorts of decisions in a lot of instances.
Okay, so if I go back to, sorry, for some reason this didn't, just broke my sharing here. Let me try and reshare. I have tried. Sorry, I'm trying to go back to the Mad Lib, but it's not letting me. If I go back to that and I look at, sorry, there we go. This capability. So then what is the actual capability? What is it you're trying to do?
The capability is really aligning incentives, right? Because when the university benefits from student success and students benefit from the university success, creating those.
So why didn't you say that? Why didn't you say, we believe that, aligning the incentives for student debt?
Well, I said aligning incentives of students, universities, and.
But I don't know what it is. My incentives could be, I want a good grade, so the university can align with me by giving me straight A's and I never show up to class to UNC Chapel Hill, right?
So by aligning financial incentives as opposed to.
The details matter, the specific things matter, the stuff you want to measure matters. Say it, no one knows what the hell you're talking about. Say it.
My perception from the outside of this, the university could benefit because they could have more students. How many students choose not to because of the fear and the burden of unaffordable debt? And the students, well, you know, how many students decide they're not going to go to college because they don't want to take on $100,000 worth of debt with no way to pay it back?
Right.
So that's one customer of theirs. I personally don't think, and I'm out of the, you know, the academic melees of what do I know about endowments? I mean, maybe I don't know, and maybe it's a big deal, but in talking to the 30-somethings, they could care less about how the endowment is managed. They care, you know, their pain is the debt.
Yeah, that's right.
The university could have more customers if there was a better way for the students to, a more affordable way for them to pay off the debt through this program.
To be fair, they're still taking on the same amount of debt. They're just taking on debt in a different way.
Well, it's not debt because you don't, theoretically, you don't owe principal, you owe a portion of your income. So if the university doesn't fulfill its side of the obligation insofar as providing you an education that you can then earn a living wage and be prosperous, then your liability is, in theory, if not nothing, effectively marginal. Whereas currently, you take out $10,000 in loans, guess what? You graduate, you're making $27,500, tough. Is the reality now.
So
Why then it's not written in the customer's, your customer's perspective? So your customer isn't the students and their debt.
Right.
Your customer is some investor.
So
Private investor or the university as an investor.
And if I'm being cynical, you've created a product, and I'm doing this intentionally to be provocative. You've created a product for the liberal arts and humanities to never pay for.
So why not call it a performance guarantee or something like that? I mean, you know, it's like we're guaranteeing your performance because you don't have to pay us if you don't make any money.
That's right.
So, whoa, you gotta go back to that liberal arts and humanities thing. No, you're not gonna just like skip over that and then just go to the next question. You're gonna go into detail about why you said that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, only because that's the common narrative, is that the liberal arts don't make money and that the STEM disciplines are all that matter. I actually think that that's the exact opposite, and that we're a little too STEM heavy. And the liberal arts really are important because you hear companies talking about all they want is all the good communication skills that they've taken out by focusing only on STEM.
Well, we want to see what happens after the next recession.
Yes.
Based on that statement. It'd be very interesting to see in a hot market how this would do versus all of a sudden after a few years in the next recession.
Again, I said it to be provocative. Let's go to that.
Okay.
I want to point out that many universities do not want more students. This year we happen to. Last year we didn't want more students. Year before we definitely didn't want more students. What universities more often want are better students.
Except that the overall trends are
That's right.
going down.
There's another shift here. You're shifting the risk from the individual to the university.
Right.
So does the university want more of that risk and that debt?
Well, having been in a university teaching, would I invest in half of my students? Probably the bottom half I wouldn't. maybe the top half I would take an investment in, but how do you choose that ahead of the time?
See, but that's the beauty of this instrument, right? Because when you look at the way that it functions structurally and the reason why student debt doesn't work is because you're paying in a debt contract, you pay a fixed rate no matter what your outcome is, right? This is a quasi-equity instrument if you want to get into the financial engineering of it. So the high earning students end up cross-subsidizing the low earning students to make that effectively, in the way that it's modeled out and how it's worked in actual implementation at Purdue, a non-issue. For every $1,000 that Purdue lent to English majors in the first iteration of this example, the English majors paid back $2,500.
So you're saying Mark's not being provocative at all?
Yeah, I'm saying Mark's wrong.
But how do you avoid the health insurance problem, which is, everybody, if you're gonna have health insurance, everybody needs to take it. And if you have people who don't need it, don't take it, then you lose your leverage and.
That's right.
That
So,
kind of.
so the part of the reason so this is fascinating. Part of the reason I let the conversation go along is now I'm gonna hang you out to dry. So every time somebody said something, you defended yourself. That is not what you do. You hear them out. You didn't ask why once. You said, but here, but data. No. You let people say they could be like, this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. You didn't say why once, right? So part of why, it was a fun conversation too, and I was egging it on, but also, but that's what we do, because your idea was a little under attack.
Yeah.
And so you defend it by what you know, which I'm not saying that, if somebody's got you completely wrong, that course correcting isn't okay. But hearing out the discussion, saying, tell me more why you feel about that. Actually, Dave did it. He stopped me. He said, why? Wait, come back to that. You have a liberal arts degree, right? I don't know. No, but that,
What team he's on.
Yeah, exactly. But that's, so I wanted to draw that out a little bit because you'll do that in small ways. You will try to jump in and convince the person that you're talking to that they're not, and what you're really doing is saying, the cookie crumbs come over here, please come this way. I've almost got you where I want you to talk about my idea, right? And that is literally the antithesis of what we're trying to teach you to do. So, sorry. But it was fun and you got some feedback.
I regress to the sales pitch.
There you go. And never sell. Never sell. This isn't, I can teach you to sell. This isn't teaching you to sell. You seem like you know how to sell, but yeah. All right. So let's do one more and then we'll break a little early. We were going to do the value prop canvases, but okay. We'll send them, we'll get some feedback on them before. So wait, who haven't I heard of? Who hasn't? Yeah, there you go. Or yes, you're all one team.
Yeah.
Go.
So our sample hypothesis is we believe that our reusable biosensor can be implemented in line of a biological process, which will result in continuous, fast, and automated analysis of complex media. We will know we have succeeded when there is a reduction in process cost, process completion time, and personnel required to carry out the process.
Okay. One more time slowly. It was actually pretty good, but I want to pull the pieces.
I talk fast, so you guys will have to keep telling me that.
Yeah.
We believe that our reusable biosensor can be implemented in line of a biological engineering process.
Stop. Why is that important?
Because current methods of analyzing media within a biological process requires offline measurements,
Keep going.
which will result in continuous, fast, and automated analysis of complex media.
Stop. Tell me why those matter. That's a continuous, automated, and what?
Fast.
Fast. Okay.
Continuous and fast because, and automated, they all play together. When you remove a sample and you test it offline, it takes an hour. So by the time you get your measurements, you're already an hour past some sort of part of the process. So those measurements kind of don't matter as much.
Okay.
And fast, so that does the fast. Automated, it's in line, so you don't have to take it out and have personnel do it. And continuous, you can continuously measure those without having to wait,
Yeah.
between
Okay, so
sampling.
finish, and then I'll see where we are.
We will know we have succeeded when there is a reduction in process cost, process completion time, and personnel required to carry out the process.
So in general, those last three, you should be able to quantify. So an X% reduction in process time, or And then some of that is figuring out what's meaningful. What I'm trying to figure out is that middle piece. And, you know, I won't say I make this up as we go along, but to a certain degree, I make this up as we go along. Meaning, you know, so it's just a matter of where the words fit better and how you describe things. And that's why sort of I was puzzled for a little bit is, you know, will result in, you know, an increased efficiency or, you know, continuous process. You said it, and there are too many words and I can't do it on the fly. So sometimes it's just, the reason we do this is because we're trying to teach you how to tell a story. And so sometimes just flipping the words around a little bit is the story. So will result in is really if you think about the product, it's the pain reliever. And we will know we will have succeeded is the gain creator. That's the value. So think about it. I'm not sure how to fix it on the fly, but you're in
Ballpark.
You're in the ballpark. But again, quantify. If you do your customer discovery with diagnostics folks and you say, what's your biggest cost? If they say personnel, why is that the biggest cost? Where are they? Where does that personnel exist? Because again, you talked about personnel time, which I interpret as anytime you have to intervene in a system, it takes time and effort and energy. And if you could not intervene in that system and get the same results, then all that stuff is gone. So, you know, so some of that is trying to figure out, is that meaningful to anybody? Or is it just, will they just make that person do something else, or will they reduce an actual cost? And I don't know. And when you talk about reducing things like reducing cost or anything like that, you also have to ask the why question of, or how much would matter? Does a 10% increase matter? Does a 20% increase matter? Does a 30% increase matter? There are some, especially in the life sciences, there are some processes where you need an expert, and even if they're only there, even if they only have an hour's worth of work to do, they're still hired. You hire them to do the hour worth of work, so you're trying to figure out what they're doing the other 7 hours a day. So if you don't remove that person, it actually doesn't change all that much because they're still going to be there for some percentage of the day and you're just doing other things, right? But if you can remove them completely, then the company could say, I'll just replace them with a box and this is fine, right? So some of that is just digging down. That's pretty good. Okay, well, the benefit of that raucous conversation is unless anybody else wants to go, particularly, which is fine if you do. Don't want to talk about that?
I have a housekeeping.
Oh, please do.
Okay, so we will not see you until October 30th. However, the sand pit, if you like money and would like more of it, we expect you to come and present at the sand pit, which is on November 7th. You do not have to sign up for the full day, but we welcome you to do that if you want to come. You don't have to sign up just to come and present your short presentation. That will be during the lunch hour from 12 to 1. You'll present for about 3 minutes, and we'll give you a rundown on what you need to present the week of the 6th so that you can run it here before the sand pit on the 7th.
And we're doing that for normally we do it, you finish, and then the timing of it is you finish the class, and then that you have to present a couple weeks later. But the way the timing worked out is it's either after week 5 or 6 months from now. And so, you know, if you want the extra $1,000, we figured it'd be better to have it now than 6 months from now. You can still wait if you want to do it 6 months from now. That's fine.
And you're very welcome to sign up for Food and Ag Day. It's going to be awesome. It's an all-day event. We'll have lots of industry folks around it. It's in the Huddleston Ballroom.
Want to know what we're doing as an institution around food, nutrition, and agriculture? It's basically a half day of that. You guys are right?
Yeah, no, I raised my hand. I'll go if there's nobody
Sure.
else to go.
See me if you need more information about it. Offline.
So we believe that non-toxic and sustainable performance fabrics will result in safer indoor environments for families. We will know we have succeeded when we sell our 10,000th yard of fabric.
First two I really liked. The third I'm not sure about. Because you could sell 10,000 yards of fabric without any of the first two things happening. Okay? So, and I'm trying to think about, you're selling your success metric or your signal has nothing to do with the first two things, right? You're making the assumption that if I sell 10,000 feet, people value what I do. Maybe just that they like the color, right?
Right.
So think about how to make that last piece more specific that goes directly back to the thing that you say you want to do. Right? And sometimes what you'll find, again, we're not solving for X here. You might find that nobody cares about the thing that you care about. Fine. You don't have to care about it, but if other people do, you then have the decision to sell into the thing that people care about or insist to stay where you are where nobody cares. Those choices are yours, right? So you just got, the hardest thing is to sort of, as you see pieces of your idea dissolve, and I'm not suggesting that people don't value what you do, but as you ask folks, you'll see parts of your idea just disappear. Don't try to grab them. Just kind of go with the flow, go with where the data takes you. Your decision is, do I now want to do this new thing that I've learned or not? You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but people will tell you where they want you to go. Okay? All right, good. So we'll see you on October 30th. Some towns probably have trick-or-treating. Sorry. And we're good. So we'll send the value proposition canvases. We'll try to get some feedback. All right, thanks, everybody.